Okay, we are recording. So, hello everyone, good afternoon, happy Monday to everyone who is sitting at home, like most of us. As you can see, I'm in my home right now, and I'm here with Hamilton filmmaker Terrance Odette, who's also sitting in his office from the looks of it. I can see your Blu-ray collection behind you, which is pretty great. Mine is elevated above my head. And we're going to talk a little bit about Corpus Christi. We're going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to switch this into a live forum for our next film, but just to get this conversation out and get the process started, I thought we would. So I guess I'll quickly set up the film. I hope that everyone who is out there watching has seen it. If not, I found out you can actually still click through and rent it through Film Movement and the Art Gallery of Hamilton. So if you're inspired to watch it this week, please do. It's Jan Komasa's director. That's the director. It's his third feature. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best International Feature, which is, of course, formerly known as the Best Foreign Language category. I think quickly, if you're interested, well, we'll talk about this more at the end. One of the interesting things is that this is actually based on a true story. The film is it was inspired by a news article that the screenwriter wrote for his local paper, and then he was approached by producers to develop it into a script, and thought, well, sure, I'm going to do it myself and see what we can do. So that's how this whole thing started. Yeah, I don't know. Terry, what did you think of the film?
Well, I really liked the film. I found, I mean, it's right up my alley. I kind of like these sort of, most of my films have Catholicism locked in it somewhere. So I even thought, I was, my reaction after watching it was like, it took no turn that I thought it was going to take. I was guessing at the cliches that it would, I guessed at the turns that it would take, and it actually didn't. And I was really, really happy with that. That makes me happy to be taken places, human experience that I've not experienced. And that was certainly that way. The character himself, I found him really compelling. Visually, he had just such a great look, but also the opening scene. I mean, he's not an innocent guy, and it's brutal as hell. And then, but yet he's got this incredible desire to be a part of, to be a part of the community of a Catholic community, which I found, was totally against the way he acts, at a number of instances, and yet he turns out to be such a almost like a Christ-like character in the town, which I thought it just worked out really well. So.
Yeah, he's definitely a very complex character, and you mentioned the portrayal. I think Bartusz, I'm going to read his last name, Bileniana, was pretty remarkable in that role for someone who I haven't seen in a feature film before. Apparently, he's quite a renowned theater actor in Poland. Yeah, I just thought his performance was pretty remarkable for the amount of complexity within that character. Reminded me a lot of, I don't know if we haven't discussed this off camera, Anders Danielsen Lee, who is starred in Joachim Trier's first two films, Reprise and Oslo, August 31st. Reminded me a little bit about him. Oh yeah, so
okay.
Those are fantastic films in their own right. Not that we're here to talk about them, but
No.
Yeah, something about the portrayal reminded me a lot of Anders' characterizations of those characters are pretty complicated as well. So.
It's wonderful, and it's a part of probably I'm so attracted to cinema, not from North America, is that most of the time I don't, unless you really get involved in like French cinema and you get to know the various actors who are reprising roles and you see them all the time, and then if they make any money, they end up making some Hollywood stuff too, and Isabelle Hubert, an example, or Juliette Binoche. I wonder, what I love about it is being introduced to these actors who I know nothing about them, so I can be easily taken in to their character, but they're also really good actors, and they also don't have any kind of pretty boy or pretty girl model look. Like they look like human beings. He looks, and I'm impressed to know I wouldn't have guessed he was a theater actor. I mean, I can see that now, but at the time when I'm watching it, I didn't qualify that. I actually thought, wow, they really found somebody who, because I think of that guy, and I'm going, if he moved to Hollywood, he wouldn't get a role, except for thug in the back beating up guy, you know. So, and I love that aspect of, in particular, like Polish cinema and more of the Eastern European cinemas, where you meet these incredibly looking people who have just a real look, and it turns out they're professional actors. They work in theater, they work in film, and we just never get to see them here in North America.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny that you said that he wasn't too pretty. In fact, when the director was casting the role and was thinking of Bartosz, the producers thought initially he was too pretty for the role. He did have long hair. He was on a television show apparently in Poland where his character had a certain look, and the producers were really stuck on that look and didn't think he could actually have that raw kind of real look that he did. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that.
Oh, that's interesting, because I'll qualify. There's a very bland, pretty look that we tend to go for in television, and there's no pockmarks, there's no wounds, there's no interesting. So he's very compelling and good looking, but not in that classical.
Yeah, not in the sense that we're necessarily accustomed to in mainstream and even.
I mean, you see it more in
mainstream art house.
Yeah, you can see it more in French cinema, I think. But anyways, that's he perfectly portrayed it. I love the how he got to be the priest. It was, it wasn't overly contrived in it, but it certainly went with it.
Yeah.
It felt like it was like, in Les Miserables, there's that section where Jean is hanging around. He's been taken in by the priest. It's kind of like, at the beginning of it, I felt like, oh, this is almost like they took that scenario and expanded it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I didn't think of that before.
So it was because he becomes, he very quickly. I don't think he becomes a good human being or renounces his past. I think he just the other side of the complexity of him is that he becomes is that he finds his home, he finds his purpose, his place.
I also think it's maybe for someone who grows up as a troubled youth who's gone through that whole system through their whole life to suddenly be in a position of authority. I think one of the scenes for me that I loved was it's a pretty small, I guess it's a small scene, but the scene outside of the sawmill when he has to bless the sawmill, and when he makes all the politicians and the police and the leaders get down on their knees in the muck and the mud.
Yeah.
I just thought that was such a beautiful scene where that kind of person who's been under the system his whole life gets to kind of dictate what the people in power will do. It talks quite a bit about the church and state situation in Poland as well in that respect, and that
which is one of those things where during the where we were John Paul II was a Polish pope, and very much was against communism, and so during the communist era, of course, they're not allowed to go to church. The churches were discouraged, and then as soon as, of course, oppression of the communist regime leaves, everybody flocks back to church again, and so it's very tied to the state, and a problem, I think. Like, they definitely have a problem.
There's definitely subtext of that in the film for sure.
Yeah.
I mentioned also that it was inspired by a true story. So apparently the title comes from that true story. So it wasn't, it was not the same situation at all. It wasn't a escapee from prison, but just of someone being posing as a priest in a small town in Poland. And it was for 4 months and it took place over the Corpus Christi holiday. So that's sort of where that ties into the story in the film. Another funny thing about the making of the film that I learned through this was the town where they shot the film actually had a fake priest for almost 2 years. And the
Really?
residents were concerned that their sort of personal, like their situation was being exposed or ridiculed because they all fell for a false priest.
Yeah. Well,
Apparently it happens a lot in Poland.
wow. I don't think you can get away with that here in Canada.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So as a film director yourself, is there anything that you maybe picked up in the direction of the film that you found interesting?
I've immensely competently directed, like just a wonderfully directed film. There's nothing. I thought all the choices, like for me, I was watching it in that way too, and I thought all the choices were great. I got involved in the film, and if I get involved in the film, I'm not watching the director, and then I'm really happy because I don't really want to be watching a director. In comparison, we've been watching Westworld, the 3rd season, and I'm finding it immensely disappointing because I'm seeing directors all over it, and it's kind of, it pulls you out. It takes you out. A story like this, you have to have a very competent and confident director who knows when when he or she needs to know when to just, when you've shot enough, when you have a scene, and that all of course happens in the editing afterwards. But when you're out shooting it, you have to make those choices too. It's like, I'm going to spend about this amount of time and this is all I need. I thought it was so competently done and beautifully done too. And music composition, the score was nicely placed. I really think it's a very good film. And speaking with my daughter Bridget, we watched it together, and Bridget was she said, if Parasite wouldn't have won, that she had heard that was the sort of the second film that people were most impressed with, and I can see why. And unfortunately, hopefully we don't see a remake in the U.S. starring Will Ferrell or something like that.
I mean, it seems perfectly set to have a remake over here. It's the type of film that could really be remade well. Although I know what you were alluding to when you said the remake with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
That's online now. Did you see that remake yet?
No.
We're of course talking about the force majeure remake.
I don't know why I would even. I find that almost offensive. I can handle when David Fincher does it, only because he's such a good director. It's worth watching. But I find that offensive. I remember when Let the Right One In was remade almost immediately, and as an American film, and it was a decent enough film, but why? If it's all about making money and not reading subtitles. I really like when the people like Michael Haneke remake their own films shot for shot and said, screw, fine, I'll make a good paycheck, for the film I didn't make a good paycheck on and shot. So I really I'm going to try and look for this director's for other works. I've not heard of this director. I do know he's from that famous Polish, school where everybody who's any Polish director we've ever heard of has been. So I really want to see more. Have you seen more of his work?
I haven't, but I did a quick search to see if it's possible to watch anything online right now. So his previous film to Corpus Christi was called Suicide Room. It's on iTunes right now, so you can rent or buy it off iTunes. And his first feature, Warsaw 44, is on Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay. I'll look for that.
And he has a brand new film that premiered March 5th in Poland called The Hater. It was scheduled to make its North American premiere at Tribeca. So who knows what's going to happen with North American
So that might be at
premieres.
the AGH then.
Yeah, there's a very good chance we could be.
There's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of Poland right now too, right? Like with Cold War and Ida, a director, and
absolutely.
Agnieszka Holland's been. I hear her last. I hadn't seen her last film, but I heard her last film was quite good. It's good to that. We're seeing that there's a bit of a surge there again. They really have, they've got their Kieslowski and the usual sort of group, but it's good to see a new wave of us being able to enjoy Polish films here.
Yeah, it's nice watching successive sort of waves of directors and like kind of stylistically joined, and obviously all those directors came out of the same school, so there's sort of that the new Polish, like the new wave of Polish cinema. I think that's so I guess I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll set up next, or this current week's film. What your last film, Fall, which is available on iTunes and Google Play to rent. You're dealing with sensitive subjects around the church. Much like this film is different, but it's a sensitive issue for a lot of people. So when you're working on a film that is kind of tackling these difficult issues that are sort of so deeply ingrained in a culture that like the Catholic culture itself, that is such a huge monolith, like how do you approach that material? Like how do you work as a director within those types of difficult stories and ones that no one wants to hear?
Well, I think you have to have confidence, first of all, going in and saying, I am going to say this, I am going to tell this, this is going to be seen. I feel like I stand out. You eventually have to stand outside of the story, that if there's any personal attachment to it or anything like that, and reconnect with it, enjoy, and like reconnect back with a Catholic culture. For me, being a kind of a a non-practicing Catholic, having been raised in it, having been very, very ingrained in it, like I really was a big part of my life for a lot my youth. I think I know it. I know the flavors of it, and I understand it, and I go back into it with respect. The fact that there are people who this is important to them. So I'm not trying to, you go in it not trying to make fun of it, but at the same time you do allow the ironies to stand out, so I mean, other than that, I don't really think about it a lot. It's just, it was such a part of my life that it's a natural place for me to tell stories from. I mean, 2 of my 4 films are set specifically within a Catholic milieu, Roman Catholic, and I think so. I really, I'm the writer of them, so it started back when I was writing it. And so by the time I'm directing it, I have a different sensibility when I'm coming to it. I have I have the blueprint in front of me, and I am following that. And and I let the actors bring what they can. I remember in St. Monica teaching the little girl how to say Our Father. I mean, she had no idea, and I was like, oh really? Oh, okay. So but other than that, like Michael Murphy in Fall, he was an old Catholic. He could bring that stuff forward. So it's just more, that's really how I approach it. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's helpful to people to hear from an artist how you kind of work on that, what your process is, and how you go about that. Okay, well, why don't I set up this week's film? Have you seen it yet?
Not yet.
No? Wild Goose Lake is this week's film, thanks to our friends at Film Movement. If anyone's interested in checking it out, we're going to have a conversation about that next week. It is artgalleryofhamilton.com, aghfilmfest.com. You can find the link. We kind of talked about successive waves, scenes of filmmakers, the new wave of Polish cinema. The director Zhao Yinan is a member of China's 8th wave, as they're calling the current sort of group of directors who are making films. His previous film, Black Coal, Thin Ice, won the Golden Bear at Venice in 2014. It's a fantastic film. I saw, why don't we talk about this film a little bit next time? We'll show the trailer, and thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks, Terry, for joining us. And
my pleasure.
We'll talk again soon.
Yes.
All right. I can do this.